Kia ora koutou, this is Wendy Carr from Feilding and District Promotion. Today I've got two special guests joining me, Jeff Graham, who is the Senior Emergency Management Advisor at the Manawatu District Council, and Brook Rush, who is the Safety and Wellbeing Advisor. Thank you both for joining me today.
No worries.
Thanks.
So today we're going to have a quick chat about business continuity and risk assessment, specifically around COVID-19 and what that might mean for your business or organisation. So first up, we'll just hand over to Jeff and let him give us a little bit of a definition about what business continuity is.
Cool. So really, business continuity is the planning of a business's endurance to crisis or change from external or internal emergencies. That can affect the business's reputation, functionality, and it can be from failed systems or frameworks, really. So business continuity is not just about having a plan for natural disasters either. It is a process that enables organizations to take practical steps to become more resilient and be able to minimize the impact of a disruptive event. So that can include loss of staff, can include loss of buildings or facilities, also disruption of power supply or water or sewage, any of those utilities. It can be your loss of IT systems or a failure of a third-party supplier to provide their services to you as well. So you could have a food chain supply issue or anything like that. A lot of those are applicable in COVID-19 because really a failure of a global supply chain is already kind of really adamant in the global system currently. You can see it in a lot of the supply chains that are out there. So with that, yeah, that's really my kind of definition of how business continuity works in. Thanks,
Jeff. And Brook, what would your definition of risk assessment be for a business or an organisation?
Cool. So in its simplest form, I suppose, a risk assessment is literally taking a risk and assessing the impact that could have on your staff or customers or any contractors that you may be working with. And so I guess in terms of my line of work and the health, safety and wellbeing sort of thing, literally the main tool we would use would be a 5x5 sort of risk matrix where you take your risk and start off by looking at the likelihood of that occurring. And so for something that you sort of never really expect to occur, you might score that at a 1 on your risk matrix, whereas something that you expect to happen regularly with the work that you do might be scored sort of at the top end, which would score at a 5. Then from there, you look at the consequence of that risk. So if it did occur, what is the consequence? And again, you might score it really low if it's even if it did happen, it's actually not going to have a big impact on anybody. Or at the other end, if it actually could be quite catastrophic, you might score it at a 5. And so basically, the higher the score, the higher the risk. And I guess the second part to any good risk assessment is then actually coming up with a list of controls that you can put in place to either eliminate or minimize the risk going forward. And so in a perfect world, what you would then do is actually do that first step again, taking those risk controls into consideration. And in a perfect world, the likelihood and consequence, if not just one of each, will decrease. And basically what that's showing you is, your risk is lessening.
Excellent. Thank you, Brook. Thanks both. So what we're going to do now is just talk through some tips for businesses and organisations about how they can manage these situations. So we'll start with Jeff. What are your tips for businesses and organisations on business continuity and planning for, hoping for the best and planning for the worst?
Yep. So really you need to currently hoping for the best is essentially you're looking at possibly not becoming a location of interest, but there's a high probability that you're going to be. So really the first step I think a lot of businesses need to take towards that is look at your business operating model and how that aligns with the COVID protection framework. How are you going to align yourself as a business to that framework? Because that is going to be here. And that is the new way forward as indicated by the central government. So you need to look at that and how you're going to make that work within your business. Then from there, also look at your critical business activities, what you can't function without. What are those things that your business can't work without. And particularly focus that around staff, because really that is one of the key links in the chain that can be affected by this pandemic currently. Then from there, look at your priority business activities. What are those things that are the next level down from the criticals? And then look at your non-essential business activities and plan for if there's a disruption to any of those and look at how it will affect your business operating model.
Excellent.
And then finally, you need to do some planning for when you become a location of interest. So the location of interest isn't just an easy kind of, let's just open back up kind of thing. You have to do some cleaning. You have to do some guidance to your staff that have been ordered to self-isolate. You have a lot of risk appetite that you have to weigh up and figure out what you need to do and how you want to do it. So there is a bit of a kind of general procedure for if you have a site or if your main site is confirmed as a location of interest. You need to figure out how long you're going to close your building for. You're going to need to figure out who you're going to organize a deep clean through, because there is a deep clean requirement that is on the Ministry of Health's website. I'm sure Wendy will put up some links to that. And then from there, after a further amount of time has passed, you need to figure out when you're going to reopen, what staff you're going to be reopening with, because essentially if your team that was on during that time are now isolating for 14 days, who's going to staff your business? Then you also need to take into consideration if your staff have been at an external location of interest as well. So it's not on your site. It could be that, for example, the other day when we had the Burger King location of interest in Palmerston North, a staff member could have been there. How would you treat that? Would you then say, all right, any of the staff that have been interacting with that staff member need to stand down? The guidance from the Ministry of Health is that you don't need to do that. But that's a risk appetite that your business needs to decide upon as how you will react to that kind of situation. And finally, the biggest thing that I could encourage businesses to do, if they have capacity to do it, that's only if, is figure out how you could work with a 2 or even maybe 3 team approach to operating your business. Because if you do that, if you split your team into 2, then you could possibly have that location of interest covered off and you could still continue to operate, because the people that were on site when it became a location of interest are now self-isolating for 14 days. But the people that weren't on site during that time could be not self-isolating, and you could still have some operational abilities.
Thank you, Jeff. And Brooke, what's your tips for how to do a risk assessment and what businesses need to think about?
Cool. So I guess where I would point most people is the stuff that WorkSafe has put out. So they've actually put out a set of 7 questions which are specifically related to basically doing a risk assessment around COVID-19. And I guess also what we have done in terms of a group of councils in our region is we've taken those 7 questions and actually put them into a bit of a risk matrix. And so I'm more than happy to share that with anyone if they just flick an email to healthandsafety@mdc.govt.nz and ask for the risk assessment template. I can flick that to you as soon as possible. But what I would say right now is really get on and get these risk assessments done. For smaller organisations, it may be that you just do one risk assessment for your whole business. But for an organisation where you've maybe got a few more workers and they're doing quite different roles, I'd probably suggest that you look at doing individual risk assessments for each one. And yeah, then from there, coming up with the risk controls that you can put in place. And I guess there's lots of those that have been mandated, I suppose, by the government, like the wearing of masks and the distancing and things like that. So that, I guess, makes it a bit easy if it's not something you have to come up with yourself. But I would really encourage you, especially if you're a retail or hospitality type business, to think about, is there a better way that we can set up our area to really keep that distancing and not have to worry about it so much. Simple things like if you can accommodate it, having an indoor and an outdoor and things like that are really easy ways to go about it. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Just speaking of those two industries in particular, there are obviously different plans and different assessments that businesses need to do depending on what industry they work in. Obviously, if you work in a professional service or an office-based situation, it's a lot easier to be able to mitigate risk and be able to keep your business continuity flowing when you can pick up and work from home. Hopefully people's IT systems are now up to the 21st century and people are able to work remotely. But for those other businesses that aren't, so say retail and hospitality, what are your tips, Jeff, on what they can be doing or should be thinking about?
Yeah, as I said, it really needs to be that location of interest procedure. That is one of the key things that's going to affect a lot of businesses. Because as you can see out of Auckland and everywhere else around the country, locations of interest, I mean, there's probably at least 10 to 15, if not more, a day popping up. When you start looking at the odds of that, that becomes pretty high locally, especially once COVID becomes more endemic within New Zealand, that there is the chance that it might be affecting a local business or more. And so with that, yeah, it's really that kind of how can you make sure that your business can still continue to operate even if you've been a location of interest. And that's really a priority around those essential services as well. So we have been having a few discussions with some of the essential services and making sure that they have that ability to be able to continue, because society tends to grind to a little bit of a halt when those essential services aren't operating. And so with that, making sure that you do have those plans in place. If you don't, please make them now, because it's not going to be a matter of if, it's going to be a matter of when currently.
Absolutely, yes. We can see through the news that it's spreading through the country, and it is inevitable that it will hit the Manawatu at some stage. So the whole point of this video today is to help people to understand the things that they need to be thinking about, and that there are resources out there to help. So all three of us are available to talk to about these specific things. First point of call, come to me if you need any advice or support with where to even start with these sorts of things. So what about you, Brooke? What are your tips for, say, retail and hospitality? You talked just before about having separate areas and social distancing. Any other tips?
I think those are kind of the key ones. What I would say is in terms of the risk assessments for those kind of industries, your retail and hospitality, it's likely that you're going to come out with a relatively higher score, because a lot of it is based around the number of people that you might be coming into contact while you're working, and also how easily you can sort of track those people. And you think about somebody in an office environment, maybe works with 2 or 3 co-workers and doesn't actually have any public interaction. That's relatively low risk in that sense, whereas an easy one is somebody working in a supermarket coming into contact with hundreds of people a day, potentially cafes and stuff as well, and not always knowing who those people are. So I guess I would probably also encourage you, where you can, to actually sit down with your staff, either after you've done the risk assessment for their role and talk to them about it and be open to their feedback, or in a more perfect world, actually do the risk assessment with them, and things like that. But yeah, I guess the hospitality and retail, probably, this is going to be a higher risk. COVID-19 will be a higher risk to those workplaces probably.
Absolutely. So where can people go for help? The first point of call, you can give me a call. We'll make sure we post all the links that we are talking about with this video and on our website. So if you need any support, you can come to us. But Jeff, what are the key websites or places people can go around business continuity and planning?
Yep. So we have a little pamphlet mainly focused around the kind of the natural disasters risk framework for business continuity planning. That's on our district council website. And then from there, there's quite a good little bit on business continuity planning on the National Emergency Management Agency's website as well. So I'll make sure that link is available as well. And then from there, there's some really good information on what if your staff become a COVID positive case, and that's on the Ministry of Health's website. And then there's also the cleaning procedures for a location of interest. That's available on the Ministry of Health website as well. So really those kind of 4 key ones is what I'd promote out of anything. And those are the ones that are going to be most useful to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jeff. And how about you, Brooke? What about risk assessment? Where do we go to find information?
Yeah, so WorkSafe are really good. They've got a few pages on their website dedicated to COVID-19 and what it means for, I guess, the safety of workers and meeting obligations under the Health and Safety at Work Act and things like that. But also, as I mentioned earlier, this risk assessment template that we've developed, people can either flick me an email to grab it, or Wendy will have a copy anyway also. And so if you sort of are a bit lost and don't know where to start in that sort of space, I'd really encourage you to take a look at that template, and hopefully it will work for you. Wonderful.
Well, I'd just like to thank you both for joining me today, and thanks for your time and your expertise. It's greatly appreciated. So thanks for joining us. We will continue to do these sorts of videos in the coming weeks, just to give people tips and tricks on how to safely navigate these next coming months. It's going to be an interesting time. So thanks again for joining us. Ka kite anō.